Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing.
Well, welcome to Kung Fu Risk Management. We're going to try to be non-violent here. As Mr. Miyagi says, that's usually the best way to resolve dispute. But our first topic is about builder's risk. We're calling this Enter the Builder's Risk Dragon. Okay. And by the way, for those of you wondering, John is the one on the right. Okay. We considered going shirtless today, but we thought it would be a little too distracting given the muscles that were involved. So we are fully dressed. And we didn't just pick this title because we wanted to work in builder's risk into a really cool Bruce Lee movie. That was 50% of the reason why we picked this title, okay? But there is actually a legitimate reason, and because when you're talking about builder's risk, it is a dragon, okay? And it's really for two main reasons. Okay? First reason is that builder's risk is highly unpredictable, okay? Now, why do I say that? Why is builder's risk highly unpredictable? Well, contrary to most people's impression, there is no standard form for a builder's risk. Okay, everybody heard of ISO, Insurance Services Offices? Okay, well, ISO they put out a lot of standard form GL policies, standard form auto liability policies. You may see this a requirement in the contract that it be a standard ISO form. Well, there is no such thing as a standard builder's risk form. Okay, all the carriers have their own forms. They can vary widely among the carriers, and indeed many carriers have multiple forms. So that's the first reason for that unpredictability. Coverage can vary very widely between those forms. Second reason is that builder's risk can be provided by the owner. It could also be provided by the contractor. Okay, and we're mostly a room full of contractors. There may be a few owners here, but I don't think it's going to shock you if I say that usually the owners are concerned about one thing on the builder's risk, and that's what the price is. Okay, and so that tends to have an inverse relationship with coverage. Okay, the cheaper the price of the builder's risk, the less coverage it provides. And so if you've got an owner who's taking the responsibility for the contract to provide the builder's risk policy, very often their sole concern is the price of that builder's risk, and they're not really concerned about what the coverage that it provides or what warranties are there, and so that creates another level of unpredictability. By the way, contractors are not immune from that temptation. Okay, obviously contractors are concerned about price because you could have the greatest builder's risk policy ever. If it doesn't get you the job, it's really not worth much, is it? So that's a concern on both parties. It also may be part of a regular program, or it could be part of a standalone project-specific policy. What do I mean by regular program? Well, general contractors generally have what's called a reporting form builder's risk. These are the things that they can just roll on and provide notice to their carrier of what they have. They don't even have to have notice. They just have automatic coverage for it. But there are certain types of projects that are not going to fall within or qualify for that reporting form. So just because you're doing work for the same general contractor in two different project sites, that doesn't mean the same builder's risk is going to apply. Okay, so you could have some differences there. Also, and this is not going to come as a shock, okay, but builder's risk coverage forms are rarely reviewed prior to contract signing. Okay, before anybody knows who's responsible for providing it, nobody's looked at that coverage form, and nobody's asked their agent to look at that coverage form. So it's usually on down the road after the contract starts when somebody actually sees what is being provided. And so all those things taken together make it highly unpredictable. Builder's risk dragon. Okay. Point two, very dangerous. Okay, because large deductibles, coverage gaps, and exclusions can expose you, and under your contract you may be responsible for very large deductibles. So what we're talking about here is very high risk, and that's why we call it the dragon, builder's risk dragon. And so what we want to do this morning is explore some of the top perils, okay, that you would confront in a course of construction context, okay, or that are going to come up and potentially present a builder's risk claim. And so when John and I were trying to scratch our head figuring out what we're going to say about this, what we thought it'd be a good idea is to come up with this triangle of risk, okay? And this kind of sounds a little bit, you know, highfalutin, but it makes sense, okay? There are three things that you need to take in consideration to master that builder's risk dragon, okay? Well, the first one's obvious, right? It's the builder's risk policy, okay? What are the deductibles on the builder's risk policy? What are the sublimits on the builder's risk policy? What are the exclusions on the builder's risk policy? Are there any warranties in the builder's risk policy? But that's not all, because you do have your own coverage that may be applicable in the course of construction context, okay? You're going to have an installation floater, okay, especially if you're a specialty contractor, that may provide some coverage in that course of construction. So you want to know also what are the deductibles, what are the sublimits, what are the exclusions on that installation floater, how are they going to relate? But that's not all. There's more. It's like the Ginsu knife commercial. But wait, there's more. Your contract also is going to require you to have and take on certain obligations.